In 1901, Greek sponge divers were working a shipwreck off the coast of Antikythera Island when they hauled up something strange. Among the marble statues and pottery, they found a corroded lump of bronze that didn't look like much at first. But inside that corroded mass were gears. Precision-cut bronze gears that could predict solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance. This wasn't some primitive tool or decorative trinket. It was an analog computer from ancient Greece, built around 100 BCE, using technology that wouldn't appear again in human history for another 400 years. The device could calculate the positions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets without anyone needing to look at the sky. It could forecast eclipses 19 years ahead. And it raises a deeply uncomfortable question. What civilization builds computers before anyone knows computers are possible? In the next 10 minutes, you'll see why this bronze box changes everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. The story begins with Greek sponge divers in the spring of 1900, working the waters near the tiny island of Antikythera between Crete and mainland Greece. They were hunting for natural sponges when a storm forced them to shelter near the island. While waiting out the weather, they decided to dive and check the seabed for anything interesting. What they found was a Roman-era shipwreck from around 70 to 60 BCE, absolutely packed with treasures. The ship had been carrying luxury goods from the eastern Mediterranean, probably heading to Rome. There were bronze and marble statues, glassware, jewelry, pottery, and wine amphorae scattered across the ocean floor. The Greek government organized a proper salvage operation that lasted 9 months. Divers brought up statue after statue, including the famous bronze statue of a young man that's now in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. But among all those obvious treasures, there was this corroded, unimpressive lump of bronze that nobody paid much attention to. It sat in storage for months. Then one day in 1902, an archaeologist named Valerios Stais noticed that the lump had gear wheels embedded in it. He pointed this out, but most scholars dismissed it. Ancient Greeks with gears? Surely it must be from a later period, they said. Maybe it fell into the wreck centuries after the ship sank. For decades, the mechanism sat in museum storage while the beautiful statues got all the glory. So what exactly is this thing? The Antikythera mechanism was originally housed in a wooden case roughly the size of a shoebox, maybe 34 centimeters tall, 18 centimeters wide, and 9 centimeters deep. The wood rotted away centuries ago in the seawater, but we know it was there because traces remained in the corrosion. The case had bronze dials on the front and back, covered with inscriptions in ancient Greek. Think of it like an elaborate mechanical clock face, except instead of telling time, it's telling you where celestial bodies are in the sky. What survived are 82 corroded bronze fragments, some no bigger than a coin. The largest pieces show gear teeth still clearly visible after 2,000 years underwater. The gears are cut with surprising precision, some with triangular teeth that mesh together smoothly. For decades, nobody could see what was inside these corroded lumps. Then, in 1974, a radiographer named Derek de Sola Price used X-ray imaging to peer through the corrosion. What he found was astonishing. Inside the fragments were at least 30 bronze gears of different sizes, all designed to mesh together in a complex system. More recent CT scans have revealed even more detail. Some gears have as many as 223 teeth. They're arranged in multiple layers, with differential gearing that allows different parts of the mechanism to rotate at different speeds. This isn't crude work. This is precision engineering that requires advanced mathematical knowledge and serious metalworking skill. But here's where it gets truly strange. Those gears weren't just for show. They were calculating something specific. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't a clock or a decorative toy. It was an analog computer built to model the cosmos as the ancient Greeks understood it. You would turn a hand crank on the side and the gears inside would calculate the positions of celestial bodies for any date you wanted, past or future. The front dial showed the zodiac and the ancient Egyptian calendar, displaying where the sun and moon were against the background stars. But it went much further than that. The mechanism could track all 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Each planet moves at its own speed across the sky, sometimes appearing to move backward in what we call retrograde motion. The Greeks knew about these patterns from centuries of observation, but calculating where a planet would be on a specific future date required serious mathematics. The Antikythera mechanism automated that calculation. You input a date by turning the crank. The gears would rotate at different speeds relative to each other. Then you could read off the positions of all the celestial bodies for that date. No need to wait for clear skies or spend hours doing manual calculations. The back of the device had 2 large spiral dials. These tracked longer cycles, including the metonic cycle, which is the 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same days of the year. Another dial tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games and similar athletic festivals, which were timed according to celestial events. The inscriptions on the mechanism include an astronomical almanac, describing the rising and setting of specific stars throughout the year. One of the most impressive features of the Antikythera mechanism was its ability to predict eclipses. Not just roughly, but with startling accuracy, up to 19 years in advance. The ancient Greeks had figured out something called the Saros cycle. They noticed that eclipses repeat in a pattern every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Actually, the Babylonians discovered this first, and the Greeks learned it from them. But knowing the cycle is one thing. Building a mechanical device that automatically calculates it is something else entirely. The mechanism has a spiral dial on the back with 223 divisions, representing the 223 lunar months in the Saros cycle. As you turn the crank and advance through the months, a pointer moves along the spiral, and when it reaches specific marked positions, it tells you an eclipse is coming. The inscriptions even specify what kind of eclipse to expect and what time of day it will occur. Another dial tracks the exoligmos cycle, which is 3 Saros cycles or 54 years. This refinement accounts for that extra 8 hours in each Saros cycle. The ancient Greeks understood that celestial mechanics followed mathematical rules, and they encoded those rules into bronze gears with extraordinary precision. This level of eclipse prediction wouldn't appear again in Europe until the 14th century, when astronomical clocks started showing up in medieval cathedrals. But those clocks were built by cultures that had centuries of accumulated knowledge to draw on. The Antikythera mechanism was built in an era when most of the Mediterranean world still thought the gods controlled the heavens directly. And just when you think that's the full story, there's another detail that makes you wonder what else this device could do. Here's the part that keeps historians up at night. The Antikythera mechanism represents a level of technological sophistication that simply doesn't appear again in the historical record until the 14th century. When European clockmakers started building astronomical clocks for cathedrals around 1350 CE, they were working with similar gear systems and astronomical calculations. But between the Antikythera mechanism around 100 BCE and those medieval clocks, there's a gap of roughly 1400 years where nothing remotely comparable survives. No ancient Roman texts describe devices like this. No medieval Arab or Byzantine manuscripts mention inheriting this technology. It's just gone. Either the knowledge was lost completely when the Roman Empire collapsed, or it was so rare and expensive that almost none were ever made. Maybe both. We know the ancient Greeks had the mathematical knowledge to design such a device. Archimedes wrote about mechanical planetariums, and Cicero mentioned seeing one. But we assumed those were simple models, not precision computers. The Antikythera mechanism proves we were wrong. It raises a troubling question. How much of ancient technology have we completely misunderstood because so little of it survived? Metal gets melted down and reused. Wood rots. Pottery breaks and gets thrown away. The only reason we have the Antikythera mechanism at all is because it sank to the bottom of the sea and was sealed away from oxygen for 2,000 years. If that ship had made it to Rome, the mechanism would probably have been scrapped for bronze centuries ago. We'd never know it existed. What else could the ancient Greeks build? What other technologies did the Romans have that we've dismissed as impossible because nothing survived? The Antikythera mechanism is a reminder that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The Antikythera mechanism survived by pure accident. One shipwreck, one storm, one group of sponge divers looking for shelter. Without that chain of coincidences, we'd still believe the ancient Greeks couldn't possibly have built anything this advanced. And that's the real lesson here. The past wasn't primitive. It was just less documented than we'd like. We base our understanding of ancient technology on the tiny fraction that happened to survive fire, decay, looting, and 2,000 years of people melting down metal for scrap. And when something like the Antikythera mechanism turns up, it forces us to rethink everything. How many other devices like this were built and lost? What could the Library of Alexandria have taught us before it burned? We'll never know for certain. But we can stop underestimating what people in the past were capable of building. Next time you see an ancient artifact in a museum, remember that what survived is just the tip of the iceberg. The Antikythera mechanism is the exception that proves we've been looking at history wrong. Take a closer look at the past today. You might be surprised what people figured out long before we thought it was possible.